Hello and welcome. My name's Stephen Wright. I'm a clinical psychologist and founder of Oaks Child and Adolescent Psychology. Today I'm going to be talking about Lockdown 2.0. So in the UK, last Saturday, wasn't it? We found out rather short notice that we would be going into a second lockdown following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic earlier this year. So what I wanted to talk about today in particular was about mental health of children, teenagers, adolescents, and young people a little bit as well, so young adults as well. So before I get going, please, this is a kind of something that I'm opening up to all people, so feel free to share it, like, comment. If you've got any questions, type them in, and I'll try and answer them all. If not, I'll get back to them afterwards. But so that's the aim of today, just to talk about mental health, think about what might be some of the impacts of this new lockdown. I think a bit about the differences from the first lockdown as well, because there are quite a few differences, and also think a little bit about what we might do over the coming few weeks or month, or however long it's going to be, to kind of try and protect and help the mental health of young people. So that's a little bit about what this is today. So I thought I'd start just by kind of outlining a few of the differences, because actually this, it's been called Lockdown 2.0 because it is actually quite different from the first lockdown that we had towards the end of March 2020. So of course this information, this applies to the legislation in England as well. So if you're watching in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, or anywhere else in the world, actually the rules might be slightly different, but the theme's probably quite similar. So think about the differences in the UK between the two lockdowns. So the lockdown, as I said, started it started on Thursday, didn't it? And some of the differences are firstly about who and when you can meet people. So this is a big change from the first lockdown, where we were told not to meet people at all outside of our households. And that was quite a firm rule. This lockdown, I think there's a slightly different safeguard built into that, and I hope that it's about protecting people's well-being. So the main difference is now that you can meet one friend outside, not within your own, so not a garden within your own property, but in a outside public space such as a park, a nature place, or something that's outside that's open. You can meet one friend. Also, if you have children under 5 as well, children under 5 aren't included in this count. So for example, if you were a parent meeting another parent, both of you had small children under 5, that would be okay. And I think the good thing about this is, I suppose a lot of it's probably aimed at parents, but it's quite good at supporting people, making sure people still have contact with other people during this lockdown, which I think is really important. The other big difference, this is one of the biggest, probably the biggest difference actually, and it's important to the people we're thinking about today, is that schools, sixth forms, colleges, and universities are staying open. So places of education, whereas in March, the lockdown in March, these were closed down unless you were children, unless for children of key workers or vulnerable children or other sort of specific reasons. But for the most of the population, schools were closed down, universities were closed down, teaching switched to sort of homeschooling or online. So keeping those open again, I think, is a bit of a nod to the importance of connections for young people, being able to see people, being able to continue with their education, but also being around other people. And another big difference that I think is important for families is that bubbles will continue. So bubbles came in later on in the March lockdown, but this time they're there from the start. So single parents can have a bubble with one other household. It has to be the same household the whole time. But for example, if you're a single parent and you are friends with another family, whatever their makeup is and whatever your makeup is, you can form a bubble together and stay together. And I think that's really important for children of single parent households, but the parents as well, making sure you can still get that support. And similarly to that, and this isn't just for single parents, this is for all households, the informal childcare arrangements will continue. So you can form a childcare arrangement with another household. So say you were two working parents and your children sometimes go to your grandparents or a family friend or something like that for informal childcare. With one household, and it has to be the same household, you can create a bubble with them. So again, that's good for the children to still be able to see other people. It's good for the parents as well to be able to continue having support. I think that was one of the things that a lot of parents said to me in the first lockdown was really hard. The sudden cutting off of all kind of childcare support. I found this next one quite interesting. It was outlined that sitting on a bench was okay. So I think with the first lockdown, you were allowed to do exercise for an hour outside, but you couldn't sort of stop and sit. So you had to be kind of doing something. Whereas this new rule is that you can, as long as you're socially distanced from people, you could sit on a park bench, whilst your kids played in the park, or, whilst you read a book, or whilst, whilst you just got some fresh air. And I think that's important for families as well, because it gives them the sense that they can go out, they can be outside. It doesn't have to specifically be exercise, but you can kind of go out, and just parents can relax on the bench whilst kids are playing. Which I think, again, I hope is a sort of a nod towards, people's kind of well-being. And similar to that one, as I was saying, there's kind of unlimited time as well. So whereas before you might have been able to take your kids for a walk for, say, like an hour as part of the kind of the exercise clause of the first lockdown, with this one, there's no limit to the time outside. So you could take your kids for a walk somewhere, or they could play in a park somewhere outside. Which is different and I think quite good. And the last one is a bit specific, I suppose, but the kind of the emphasis on continuing with medical support. So I think with the first lockdown, obviously there was, rightly so, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, and people stopped going to A&E when they needed to. They stopped, getting emergency dental appointments when their kids needed it, or thinking that they couldn't see the GP because the GPs would be sort of overrun and stuff. And I think with this one, there's been a nod to the importance of making sure people still get medical support. So, if your kid does have a tooth that's really hurting and they need to see a dentist, or, if they need to go to the GP, or they have regular hospital appointments they still need to attend, that's kind of been outlined that that's still important. And the last one, this isn't necessarily different to the first lockdown, but has been emphasised, is that you can always leave home to escape harm. So if children or a parent or both end up in a dangerous situation at home because of abuse, domestic violence, anything like that, it's been made very clear, I think, this time that you can leave home to escape that situation, which I think is again something that maybe wasn't outlined well enough in the first lockdown but needed to be. So that's some of the differences. So this lockdown 2.0, as some people are calling it, is going to look a bit different. A lot of the issues for people will be the same though, and it's going to be hard, on people's well-being. And again, we've been asked to do this lockdown to save lives and protect the NHS, which is really important. What I'm going to do next is think a bit about the kind of the different age groups of young people. And think a little bit about what might be some of the potential difficulties and what we might do about that. If anyone, I can see a few people are watching, if anyone has any questions as well, type them in. I'll try and answer them as I go, or I might come to them at certain points. So starting with primary age children, I've started with primary age children because children younger, that's so 4 and under, are in many ways not really a part of this lockdown because they're included in the numbers with their parents, like I was saying earlier, and childcare arrangements for younger children are able to continue as well. So primary age children, so obviously, like I said, the big difference is they'll still be going to school this time, whereas before it was only specific children. But I was thinking about some of the difficulties that young people told me about and parents told me about during the first lockdown that might be the same. So I think one of the big ones is when we have primary age children, so children from about 4 to 11, I think this applies to all children, but particularly this age group, are really good at picking up what is happening around them without us really knowing that they're doing that. I think younger children are really like sponges, and they soak up the atmosphere around them. So picking up on people's fears and worries and changes in environments and things that are different, kids will do this, and sometimes they won't realize it. Often parents, we won't realize it. It will just be happening. But if a new lockdown can build up, as adults can build up our own anxieties, thinking about what's happening in the world, what's happening, in the country, in the hospitals, in medical care. So when we feel anxious, when we're worried, or when we're feeling, a bit anxious about the month ahead, thinking like, how am I going to get through this lockdown? Our kids pick up on that as well, and it's not a bad thing. It's not anything, it's not anything wrong, because it's absolutely fine for us to feel, as adults, to feel anxious as well, or to feel worried, or to, feel fed up with the changes that are happening. But we need to be alert as well for what our kids are picking up. So just kind of noticing what's happening with your children, noticing whether they do seem a bit more anxious about things, whether, they're starting to say similar things to us, like, oh, things are really bad at the moment, or I'm dreading this month ahead, kind of noticing what's happening with them. And one thing that will make it really clear to them that things are changing as well is the kind of the loss of things that happen in their life that they are used to, or that they enjoy. So if I was thinking, for example, clubs, if any of your kids go to brownies or clubs or football clubs or sports clubs, anything like that, that are going to be closed, taekwondo, things like that, over the next month. Hopefully a lot of those will be happening where they can, online over Zoom and stuff, but obviously that's not always possible, and it's not the same when it is. So kind of that will be one thing that they're probably noticed a lot of. And just places that they would kind of go, if you go to a grandparents every Sunday, or you go to a cafe on Saturday mornings, or those kind of things that we usually do, or if you pop into the shops on Saturday afternoon, those things that you don't necessarily think of as routines, but that our kids are used to, they notice those changing, and that's something that can kind of help them see sort of unconsciously that things are different, and kind of build on some of that anxiety. I can see comments from Charlotte and Diane. Thank you. Hi. So not seeing grandparents it is one thing, and friends as well. If our kind of primary age kids are used to a friend that they see, or a sleepover or a play date that they would usually have, or sometimes have, especially kind of in this run up to kind of Christmas time as well, just noticing that things are changing, and being, that kind of raising some of the anxiety in them. So that's something to think about and notice. And alongside that, as I was saying earlier, some homes aren't good homes for young people, and obviously, not necessarily talking about anyone that's watching, but kind of maybe, your friend's friend, or someone that through school, their children might not have a great home life, and actually this month might be quite hard for those children that are at home more when home isn't a good place. So as well as looking out for the anxiety in our own kids, looking out for the anxiety in other people's kids. So I was thinking particularly with primary age children, some of the things that we might look out for is particularly an increase in anxiety. We might see this through behaviour changes, so difficulty sleeping, being quicker to become frustrated or annoyed by things, or we might see it through kind of proxies, so like washing hands more, or being more concerned about food consumption, or things like that kind of might indicate to us that something is going on for these younger children, because often at this age group as well, particularly the young half, but even up to 11, it can be really hard for young people to let us know that something is going on. They might not even be aware that they're feeling worried, but there might just be stuff that's different, like having more stomach aches, or they have more headaches, or they suddenly they don't want to go to school anymore when they used to go in every day, no problem. So yeah, being kind of on the lookout for those, I think, is particularly important. So as primary age children, I think a bit more about the kind of what we might do, but that will probably come a bit later on, because a lot of it will be universal. So thinking now about kind of secondary age and upwards, so I'm kind of slightly lumping together in this section secondary school age children, so that's 11 to 16, sixth form age children, so 16 to 18, and adult children that are in university or might still be at home in employment or apprenticeships or things like that. So one of the main differences that I think this age group will notice now is more disruption in their places of education or their workplaces. So although schools are staying open and schools have been doing, probably schools will be doing pretty much the same as what they've been doing since September, there might just be more disruption. So people might be in tighter bubbles where they get to mix less outside of their bubbles, or people might have to isolate more as people within their bubbles or their year group at school, are tested positive themselves. Unfortunately, we know that there's not a big kind of health impact on this age group, but it can cause large groups of people to then have to isolate off school. In the weeks leading up to lockdown 2.0, there's actually been quite a large amount of children that haven't been in school because they've been their bubble has been isolating. So that's something to look out for with all of this age group, but particularly students who have gone to university as well, who have moved away from home. This is a really difficult time if their whole bubble is having to isolate in halls. They might not know many people. They might be far away from home as well. But also the younger age groups. And alongside that, the kind of the loss of those social networks. So I think as we think about the teen years, young people start to move away from their family being the most important part of their life to where their friends and their relationships and their social networks. I mean, social networks as in literal physical people, become probably more important for them. And this is a really difficult time for that age group, because I think losing those people that they would, after school they might usually stay out for a few hours with friends before they come home, or they might come home and then they might meet their friends somewhere usually, or might be going to the shops at the weekend, or for our kind of post-18 age group it might be going out to bars and stuff. Whereas that all started to open up a little bit again, and in the summer, and it wasn't like it was pre-COVID, but all those things were starting to open up again. Losing those, I think, could be quite a big blow, and especially for teenagers who were following the rule of six, for example, who were seeing friends outside of school. That's now, you can meet one friend outside, can't you? But that's the limits on that. So that will have a big impact, I think, on this age group. And similar to that, the kind of the loss of places to go. So like I said, when people usually go out places, and as well, gyms are closed at the moment, which is important for a lot in this kind of older part of this age group. But going to places to eat, going to places to drink, going to places to shop, that will all have will all be closed down for the next month or so. So that's something to be on the lookout for as well, how that impacts this kind of secondary plus age group. And alongside that, so that means that young people and our young adults will either be spending more time at home for the most part, or for university students, maybe more time in their halls of residence as well. And I suppose the kind of the downside of that can be that this leads to a lot more time to ruminate, so a lot more time to be sat thinking about things, experiencing kind of negative thoughts that they find to get hard out of their mind, which they might have distracted before with things they do or people they saw. So that time alone, whilst it can be good in some ways, can also become problematic or difficult for some young people. And alongside that, that can lead to kind of more feelings of pressure and stress. So if you've got more time to think about your GCSEs or your A levels that are coming up, in a few months' time, that can be quite difficult, and you can feel that kind of pressure a lot more on yourself, but also the people around you might sort of accidentally be increasing that pressure as well. So, you know, comments like, well, you've got all this time to revise now, haven't you? Or, you know, you can use this time to make sure you do well in your exams, or things like that. Or, you know, or you can kind of use this time to, you know, work on that difficulty you've got, things like that. That having that more time and that more pressure can be really difficult for this age group, where the kind of, you know, self-esteem can be very easily, you know, kind of very easily lost, or very easily slip. So again, there's kind of changes in young people's, not just their routines, but their kind of, I guess, kind of, you know, their usual defences of having things to do, having places to go, that can stop kind of rumination and lots of negative thoughts that happen. So I think with this age group, you know, I think it's particularly important to watch out for, you know, when they might become quite low in mood, when they might be, you know, starting to feel a bit depressed, or a bit low. And that's really important, because, again, this age group might not always be the best at letting people know when that's happening. Particularly if, you know, often our young people spend a lot of time in their rooms when they're at home. And this might, you know, over the next month, when there's nowhere really to go elsewhere, it might be that a lot of their time outside of school is spent in their rooms. And for 90% of young people, that will be, you know, that won't be a problem. But there might be some where that actually becomes quite difficult or quite challenging for them. We need to be on the lookout for that as well, because, you know, they might be kind of a little bit locked away. We might not always see them a lot. Might just, you know, that classic, they come down for meals and then they go upstairs again. So might be small windows when we can actually notice stuff that's going on. But we might start to see that this is happening again through behaviour. So, you know, young people tend to be a little bit more irritable with parents. But if, you know, if this increases a lot, or, you know, if you notice self-harming or problem eating behaviours, or, you know, more isolation than you would expect is normal. So, you know, not wanting to see family, you know, at all any of the time, or you know, expressing a kind of a feeling of hopelessness, like, you know, it's never going to get better, or helplessness, like I can't make it better, there's nothing I can do. Yeah, being kind of on the lookout for those. So that's kind of a bit of a whirlwind tour, but I've kind of hopefully covered the secondary age and the kind of the young adult age as well there. So looking out for all those things. And I just wanted to give a particular nod again to university students who might be, you know, quite far away from home, with people they don't really know that well. And it's really important, you know, as parents and carers of those people, to, you know, keep those communications with them open. So I'm briefly going to talk about children with additional needs as well. So a lot of what's been said applies to this group as well, but I was thinking particularly about children who have diagnoses of autism, ADHD, kind of global learning disabilities, or anything like that. And thinking again about how their change in routine might really affect this kind of cohort of people. And how some of that might be really important, might have those you know, those groups or clubs or activities that they do might be really important to them, and they might be stopped again for a bit of time. But as well, thinking about the parents as well, and maybe some of the loss of support, loss of respite that they have over the next month. You know, and thinking about how problematic that can be for some young people, some families as well. So again, it's really important to be on the lookout for, you know, behavioural changes, mood changes, you know, physical problems as well. Sometimes young people with additional needs will have kind of, you know, it will present as a physical problem. So lots of stomach aches, or problems going to the toilet, things like that, you know, that might be ways of communicating their needs through kind of non-verbal through non-verbal ways. So kind of being on the lookout for that as well, if you're the parent or carer or a professional or family friends, something like that, of a young person with additional needs. So I wanted to think a little bit about the role of parents, carers, I suppose professionals who work with children, you know, as well. It will be similar kind of things. Yeah, like I said, if you have any questions as well, type them in. I'll try and reply to them. If not, I'll get back to them afterwards. So the role of parents and carers and professionals, as I say, I think this is really important. And as I've been saying kind of all through this live, I think one of the most important things is that we're really vigilant, that we're really kind of paying attention for the kind of the little signs, because all through the age groups that we've covered, and I suppose through people in general, it can be really hard for us to let people know, what's going on. Let people know that we're having difficulties, that we're feeling different to what we're used to, that we're feeling low, that we're feeling worried, that we're feeling angry about things. It's really important to remember as well, all those emotions are absolutely fine. In fact, it is perfectly normal to feel those things right now. It's perfectly normal to feel those things, any of the time. But right now, this is a time when we might feel sad, or we probably should feel sad about the things that we've lost, that we should feel anxious, about what the future's going to hold, and that we should feel angry or fed up or frustrated, or however we kind of express it, about the situation at the moment, because this virus, this situation, this pandemic, this lockdown is hard on everyone. So what are our roles as parents? Well, firstly, our role as parents, carers and professionals is to acknowledge that these feelings will be around, and that it is okay to feel these things, and that we feel them in ourselves, and letting young people know that it's okay that they feel them as well. So if we can be honest with ourselves, and this doesn't have to necessarily be big talk. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I'm feeling really fed up today with this lockdown, or I'm feeling really sad that we can't visit Nanny and Granddad today, or whatever it is. That we're expressing these feelings so that young people know that they can as well. I think that's really important, and that's kind of always our first step, and it's a way of building good attachments with young people, that we're kind of modelling what we want them to be able to do. We're saying, this is a bit how I feel at the moment. How do you feel at the moment? And alongside that, we're kind of opening up conversations, and letting and putting the question to young people as well. So we're not just endlessly talking about ourselves, but if we're saying, like, I'm feeling really fed up today, how are you feeling? Or, oh, I noticed you looked a little bit upset yesterday. I was feeling a bit upset as well. Kind of using these conversation techniques that we would with other adults, but obviously adapting them for ages, and kind of opening up those conversations so that young people know that they can talk. They can talk about how they're feeling and what's going on. Reminding young people that it's fine to, it is fine to worry. It is fine to feel sad or low. It is fine to feel fed up or frustrated, or wonder what the future's going to hold, or be a bit pessimistic about what the next year's going to be like. Letting them know that's okay, but also being aware in our own heads enough to be, vigilant of when normal feelings become problematic. So the two things that I always say to look out for, and I say this to families that I work with, and I think it's very true in this situation, but it might be a bit harder to tell, is one, if that feeling is happening more often than not. So it's okay to feel sad some of the time, it's okay to feel worried some of the time, but if we're feeling worried 90% of the time, or if we're feeling sad, most of the time, then that might be when it's starting to become, a bit of a difficulty that you might want to think about seeking help for. And this is true of all the age groups. It might be expressed in slightly different ways in different age groups, but it's true of all of them. And the second point that I always look out for is when it starts impacting on life. And it's difficult to tell at the moment, because I would, usually I'd ask, well, have you stopped doing things that you used to enjoy, or do you find it harder to feel happy when you are doing something, or feel excited about things? Well, obviously that's hard right now, isn't it? Because we can't do half the stuff that we would usually do. It's hard to feel excited about the next month, given that we're in a new lockdown. But I think it's really important that we're recognising, when that might be. So, for example, if a young person might usually, FaceTime their friends in the evening during lockdown, if they've stopped doing that, or if they've, if their friends are doing something online, like you know, like an online kind of party or something like that, and you young person doesn't want to go to that, or if say usually in the first lockdown they would have come out with you for, you know, a walk in the park or something, or going out to meet that one friend that you can meet outside, when they would usually do that, but they're not now. So the same kind of principles are true. It's probably just a bit harder to spot this time, but when, you know, being really vigilant for when a feeling goes from some of the time to a lot of the time, or when a feeling is stopping a young person doing something or enjoying something, or, you know, participating in something that they usually would have enjoyed particularly. So being really vigilant is important. Talking is important. And I think the other thing that is important is knowing when to seek support. So this one is particularly important, again, because as I was saying right at the beginning, there's a real emphasis this time, this lockdown, on making sure people still seek the support that they need. And this is really important because it's true of physical health, it's true of mental health and emotional well-being as well. There are places to go to seek support. So, of course, firstly, you can still access your GP. It might be in slightly different ways. So it might be phone or video calls. Some of them will do, you know, face-to-face as well. But GPs are often a good first port of call if you're worried about your young person. Local CAM services are still open. You know, there was a moment in the first lockdown when Matt Hancock announced that mental health services were reopening. Well, you know, we were open the whole time. Again, they might be functioning slightly differently, but this is just as true in this lockdown, that you can seek CAM services, you know, through the NHS. You can also obviously give a bit of a plug to private providers as well. So, for example, Oaks Child and Adolescent Psychology, we offer a free consultation. So you can email or call, and you know, and I'll get back to you with a response. You know, some cases it will be advice or support. Some cases it will be like a, you know, let's think about some kind of more formal assessment or treatment plan. But, you know, those options are available as well. And I think the other role for parents alongside that, knowing when to seek help, is making sure, and I'm saying this within all safety and health guidelines, but making sure that you're using the rules that are there, because they're there for a reason. So support bubbles, I think, are really, really important, and I'm glad that they've been outlined from the start, because you know, making sure that you still use your support bubble if you've got one, or if you're forming one for the first time, making sure that you're using it. What else is there? Yes, the childcare arrangements. So, you know, one of the things that parents I spoke to, I think found really hard in the first lockdown was there was a good long period where parents were going from, you know, their children would be at school in the daytime and they would be working, and then there would be, you know, childcare arrangements some of the time as well and stuff like that. And suddenly, you know, parents were then working at home and homeschooling and didn't have the usual childcare supports, be that, you know, formal or informal, so, you know, grandparents, family, friends, stuff like that. So making sure, you know, where it's safe to do so and where it's within the guidelines, that those are still being used, because that's, you know, that's important, that the parents get the kind of respite that they need to be able to respond to their children's needs as well. So that was all the points I wanted to cover today. Sometimes it's a bit strange talking to yourself, isn't it? Because I don't know how long to talk for. But if you've watched this and you've got any questions, you can either put them in the comments section and I'll get back to you on here. You can go on Oaks Child Psychology on Facebook. So it's www.facebook.com/Oaks Child Psychology. And you can private message me there if you want it to be confidential. That's fine. I'll get back to you there. You can also email. The email is info.oakschildpsychology@gmail.com. So that's info.oakschildpsychology@gmail.com. And again, I'll get back to you. Like I said, we offer a free consultation. So sometimes people just want a bit of advice or a bit of support, and you know, we can do that by email, and we can have a quick chat on the phone. Sometimes people want to think about kind of more, you know, formal kind of psychology input, and we can think about that as well. But as I said, you know, I'm mainly doing this this webinar as a kind of a kind of community resource. So please feel free to share it, to like it, to, you know, tell anyone, tag anyone in it as well, you know, that you think might find it helpful, because, you know, all the points that we've discussed today are really just kind of because of, you know, my passion is people's mental health and emotional well-being, as anyone who knows me knows. But I think particularly for myself, there was a lot of learning from what I saw happening in the first lockdown, that I think, you know, that I think has partly been addressed in the guidelines in the second lockdown. But, you know, I think as a community and as a society, that we need to make sure that we're thinking about and continuing to kind of privilege, like right now, obviously keeping people safe, healthy, and keeping the NHS, you know, protected is the most important thing, but also, you know, making sure that people are emotionally well is really important as well. So I hope you've enjoyed today. I'm going to log off in a couple of seconds when I just find where there's the finish button. There it is. So thank you all for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and email or DM with any questions, or type in the comment section. I've been Stephen Wright, as I said at the beginning, clinical psychologist and founder of Oaks Child and Adolescent Psychology. Thank you for watching.